For my first Volbib, over 3 days, I planned to fly from Stubai over the main alpine ridge, along the Pustertal towards Bruneck, and then on towards Lienz. I knew I wouldn't complete the whole route, but that wasn't a problem, as once I was in the Pustertal, there were easy train connections both east and west along the entire route. As I only had 3 days and this was my first Volbib, I elected to use cable cars where possible, and if I landed out, I was happy to use a bus to miss out a section if that was required. I travelled from Munich to Stubai via train the evening before my Volbib was due to start. I took the cable car up to Kreuzjoch before taking off for the crux section, the crossing of the Stubai glacier. At the start, I got up and away very quickly, and there were beautiful views, but as you can see, the cloud base was barely above the tops of the mountains. Once I'd done the first valley crossing, it was easy going for a bit, but unfortunately, I soon started to run into issues with the cloud base and had to leave the main ridge and take a lower route across. This would have been fine, but due to the large amount of snow that was still present, I was struggling to make the climbs and almost aborted to plan B early on before trying to carry on and have a go at crossing the glacier. Unfortunately, this didn't work, so I went for plan B, which went very well and gave me wonderful views over the Stubai glacier and back down the Stubai valley. As I wasn't coming from the glacier, the next section was going to be the crux. I had 3 ridges to cross, all of which were snow covered, and I wasn't starting from particularly high. Here I found a great climb and was really able to admire the views, but also noticed the very low snow line and some partially frozen lakes. This was going to be my problem for the next few glides and few climbs out. The next section was an enjoyable glide due to the views. However, there weren't very many climbs, which meant I was barely scraping over some of the ribs, as you can see here. I was now coming up to the first of the 3 crux ridge crossings, the first of which can be seen on the right here, and as you can see, I'm way too low to cross it. This resulted in me ending up having to fly back down the Stubai Valley until I found a climb to scratch back up and eventually managed to cross that first ridge. As I was thermaling above the first of the 3 ridge crossings, I struggled to get much altitude, which meant that the second ridge crossing was also going to be very difficult due to the large amount of snow cover. However, this did mean that I ended up thermaling with a golden eagle, which was very spectacular, and thermaling with a bird of prey is something that I've wanted to do since I started paragliding. Unfortunately, the best footage would have been when the eagle first joined me in the thermal. However, at this point I was too low and wanted to focus on climbing out and not bombing out into this valley. Eventually, I gained enough height to cross the second ridge, but again found it difficult to get much above the ridge height, which meant that the third ridge crossing was never going to work as the entire north-facing slope was in shade and I arrived 50 metres below the top, which meant I glid down the valley back towards the Brenner Pass and landed out. This shows my route from the first day, a 50-kilometre cross country, so not too bad, but unfortunately I didn't cross the section I really needed to cross on the first day, which was the Brenner Pass. The reason I had to cross this on the first day was the second day was slightly Northföhny, and I knew there was no chance that I was going to start anywhere near the Brenner Pass in the morning. Therefore, I skipped the Brenner Pass on public transport and ended up camping in Vals, just north of Mühlbach. The next day I started from Gitsch with the plan of flying along down the Pustertal, past Bruneck and on towards Cillian. There was a lot of low cloud the next morning and I took off as soon as the cloud lifted off the hill I was on and it looked good ahead. Unfortunately, I took off too early, which meant there was still a lot of low cloud and a lot of shading out of the thermals going on, which meant I basically thought I was going to bomb out. Thankfully, while I was looking for a landing place, I caught one huge thermal that took me all the way up high above the mountains and gave me fantastic views of the main alpine ridge. Unfortunately, up at this altitude, I was well in the Northföhn. There were very strong thermals, it was very gusty, and I felt pretty uncomfortable. So at this point, I made the decision that I was going to go on and land at Bruneck and head home as the weather the next day wasn't so good. As I dropped back down lower in altitude, I thought I would just fly on a little bit past Bruneck, making sure I didn't climb too high and adding a few minutes to my flight. After I had landed, I looked at the live pressure difference on Brenner, and there was a pressure difference of 6.5 HPA between Innsbruck and Bruneck, so landing was definitely the right decision. Despite not having made it as far as I wanted to, I was really content on the last glide down, and I just soaked in the scenery of the big mountains around me and the mini adventure I'd been on over the previous few days, travelling with just my paraglider and a tent on my back and going wherever I wanted to go. I'll certainly come back for another attempt at this route in the future, hopefully with slightly more stable weather and a higher cloud base. The next few photos are me enjoying the scenery on my way to my final landing. This shows the overall route I completed with my first day in the top left, flying from Stubaital to Grossensaß, the break for public transport in the middle, and the second day, my flight from Gitsch over Bruneck and on to land at Olang-Antholz, right by the train station to take me home.